This video will give an introduction to the disk manufacturing module, and in particular will show how to call a user-written program as a test step. The DMM concept is based on test sequences made up of one or more test steps. Test sequences are assembled by choosing tests, filling in their parameters, and then adding these steps to the sequence. There are many types of predefined tests. Basic tests like verify, write, verify, read, seek, format, as well as more complex tests. The test which makes DMM completely versatile is the external program test. This test can run literally any program as a test step. Common examples are controlling an environmental chamber or a programmable power supply. But since this test can run a program, it can run a program which is in itself a test. In our example, we're going to run a program which will execute a SATA Command Compliance test. It will run the tests and then log its results into the DMM log files. As you'll see, this opens DMM to do literally any test you can imagine. Creating this test example took about 2 hours. Let's create a test sequence. Let's start with a sequential write test. You can test by time or blocks. We'll make a short test of 200,000 blocks. SATA drives are limited by Windows to 64K per transfer, so we'll set that value here. And let's use a random data pattern and do an LBA overlay. Now add this test to the sequence, and for our next test, let's do a sequential read over the same blocks and do a data compare. Here's the compare on reads. Now add this test to the sequence. Before doing our external program, let's see how to issue a user-defined command as a test step. We want to send an ATA command. Let's send your flush cache command. Flush cache has no data phase, so be sure to set the transfer length correctly to 0. Now add this as the next test step. Now let's set up to call our compliance test. You may specify any command line arguments that you need DMM to send to your program. If you need to set a voltage or choose a destructive or non-destructive test. Our compliance test doesn't need any arguments, so just leave this blank. Now browse to select your program. By the way, it must be located in a folder which has no spaces in the folder name. Ours is in the root folder. Now select your drives to test. DMM is multi-drive, multi-HBA, multi-threaded. Since our compliance test is written to use native SATA commands, you must test drives connected to native SATA ports. To test SATA drives connected to a SAS HBA, you would rewrite the compliance test to use SAT SCSI commands rather than native ATA. This is a simple process to do. Now click Start Test. You may loop your test sequence by loops or by hours for long burn-in or for reliability tests. As the test sequence progresses, the drives will turn blue. You may watch the progress of each drive and each test step using the Test Status tab. When the test finishes, the drives will either turn green if all tests passed, or they'll turn red if any test step in the sequence failed. You can view the Tiny Test Progress window. You can also review the details of your test sequence and save these to a file, etc. Of course, you can also save your test sequences and make a test library, etc. Now let's look at some log files. DMM creates several detail logs, an Access database file, a CSV text file, and individual text files for each drive. Let's look at the log file from the last test we just ran. All info about the drive and tests are recorded. Test parameters, performance metrics, pass-fail, error details if there are any. Here's our user-defined flush cache command. Here's the task registers returned. Here's the results of our compliance test. Remember, we wrote this test so we can log anything we want. Here's the command sent and the task registers that were returned. There's no limits. This is a very brief introduction to DMM. There are many DMM details we didn't cover. Complex error handling, monitoring performance and log smart thresholds while testing, many more. Many disk manufacturers rely on DMM for all their high-level testing. Let us help you find ways to make it work for you too.